Well, if you participated in a church worship service or you watched one yesterday, today might seem kind of like a little bit of whiplash. Yesterday was Palm Sunday and it's all celebrations and waving palms and shouting Hosanna. And then suddenly today's reading is Jesus is at a supper. Not the Last Supper, but just at almost like a little get together with some friends. It's like a game night, or it's just supper when you invited some friends over, a little dinner party. It's kind of a little whiplash effect. We go from all this celebration and all this excitement and all this, oh, things are going to be so great, to a quiet little dinner at someone's house. We know these people, though. It's Lazarus. It's Mary and Martha. Lazarus was dead, and Jesus rose him from the dead. And, you kind of expect, or at least I kind of expect, for Lazarus just to go out and just tell everybody and do all these and have parties and say, hey, I was dead and blah, 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 blah. But no, we're just here, and the only detail we get about Lazarus is that he's there sitting at the table. We get Mary's doing stuff, Martha's doing stuff, even Judas has some dialogue. Jesus does rebuke Judas a little bit for what he says in that dialogue, but it just says, and Lazarus was at the table too. Now, admittedly, this scene actually comes before the great triumphal entry to Jerusalem. The Bible actually, or the readings actually take us backwards in the biblical reading for some reason. And I wonder what that reason was. Why do we go from excitement, and everything's going to be great, and everything's glorious, and this is the king coming, to this quiet little dinner party? Do you remember Alanis Morissette? She still makes music, but was really big in the 90s and early 2000s. She came out with an album, her first album, called Jagged Little Pill, in the early to mid 90s. And it is considered one of the best, almost most perfect albums of all time if you look through the history of music classes and that kind of stuff, at least in terms of modern music. And it really is a genius of an album. And one of the things that people loved about her was how angry she was. Now you got to remember, this is during 90s grunge and all that, and anger was kind of the way to make music popular back then. But she was labeled through this album, Jagged Little Pill, as just the angry artist. And she could write songs, even if they were love songs, that sounded great because she was just so mad all the time. After this album, she talks about how she had a kind of an identity crisis. She didn't want to really be known as the angry girl that makes music. But then she realized that she did have a whole lot of just anger and excitement inside of her. And she realized that she needed to kind of get through that. She later had a second album, and then a third, fourth, and I think a fifth one as well. But the second album that she put out in the late 90s was a follow-up to Jagged Little Pill. And in that album, it was a completely different sound. And she wrote this song called Thank You. And Thank You, I'll put a link in this post. Thank You is a song about how she was able to let go of all that noise inside of herself and realize that she was still a whole person. Realize that even without all that anger and excitement and ramped upness, if you will, without all that, she was still a person on the inside. I grew up in a kind of a time when youth ministry was designed to get teenagers so excited. And to an extent, it still is. But if it wasn't rah, rah, yelling, jumping up and down, dancing, yelling, screaming, all this stuff at a worship service, then we were pretty much told that then it wasn't real worship because there was no real excitement to it. I'm 33 now. In my years now, I've really come to appreciate a silence, a quietness, something that centers me, and something that tells me that even without outwardly screaming and jumping up and down and doing all these things, that I can still worship and connect to God. And that it doesn't require me to be so in someone else's face, but rather I can look more into myself and find that I'm still a person who worships. The story of Lazarus, of course, of him being resurrected and brought back to life and all that, is this amazing, amazing, amazing story. And then we get to this next one where he's just sitting at a table. And there are other people who are making a fuss, and other people who are making noise, and other people who are doing things. But Lazarus just gets to sit back and enjoy his dinner with Christ. In this time when we're getting closer and closer to Easter and right off of Palm Sunday, let's take a moment to sit back and just realize that all that's required of us is just to be there at the table, to be in the presence, to acknowledge Christ. And that all the extra noise, all the extra yelling, all the extra excitement, it can just silently go away as we sit back and just enjoy a meal with the God who loves us.